guys, and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I figured I would kind of make a little tutorial just to show you how you can create some kind of like very densely vegetated areas, how to kind of sell that jungle style and jungle theme in your zoos, and just some general hints, tips and tricks that I have for doing vegetation in my zoos. So the first trick that I kind of want to talk through you guys, which I think is very, very effective and one of my favourite tricks in the whole thing that I do, is just sort of stacking plants. So often, you know, when you go to like greenhouses and things like that, perhaps tropical greenhouses where they have lots of densely vegetated plants, often the plants are kind of growing up and above you. And I do think some of the plants in this game do struggle a little bit to kind of fill that very densely vegetated kind of niche that you get in greenhouses and you get in, like, you know, if you want to kind of have like this fake artificial jungle kind of thing. And this is what I'm trying to recreate here essentially. And it kind of, when you put it all together, you can get this very nice like kind of densely vegetated area. You can see that, you know, it feels like there's a lot of plants, there's a lot going on. So I'm just going to talk you through how to make that and how to kind of make it look a little bit more realistic and how to kind of sell that to your guests, as it were, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to sell a story to your guests whenever you build a park, and to, I guess, people who view your stuff online. So let's have a start with some of the tropical plants, because that tends to be the main ones I use for this. So over here we have the elephant ear plant. Now this is a fantastic plant for doing this with because it's very, very leafy and it stacks really, really nicely. So if you actually look at the stacking that I've done here, you can't really see, like, it looks like it's all part of one plant. It's not very like obvious that it's different plants that have been stacked, and it creates this very nice leafy vegetated look. So whenever I do this, if I just go and we go to plants and we get to the elephant ear plant up, essentially, you know, you want to have like a very solid base. Like, you know, plants often grow bigger at the bottom and get narrower as they go towards the top, unless it's trees, but trees are a different story anyway. So plants often start quite bushy, and then as like the plant matures, you get these kind of like smaller leaves because they're newer leaves, so they're newer shoots, and then you often finish the top of the plant with like lots of new kind of shoots. So if you want to kind of create like a very short stocky plant, you can stack like the plants in size order essentially and create this very realistic looking kind of just like bushy plant. Oops, sorry, I went a bit too far there. And as you can see, it just really does create this kind of nice like densely vegetated effect, which once stacked with lots of other plants gives you like this, again, that kind of densely compacted vegetation. So yeah, so there's lots of different plants you can do this with. Often, again, if you wanted to have like a smaller tower, for example, you could just do like the smaller plant, and just make sure you rotate it though. And the reason you've got to rotate is because nature is chaotic, and no like plants are identical to another plant, and nothing ever grows in the same way. Everything is subjected to different temperatures, different light, different wind, and, you know, even just different soil quality. So plants are not going to ever be the same. So when you look at nature, your brain perceives that, and so then when you want to recreate something in the game that looks realistic, it really likes it when things are kind of like not uniform, when they're very rugged, when they're all very like just kind of mismatched, but like it just creates this kind of what you'd essentially see as a realistic plant. So just make sure you're rotating it, because then it creates that variation that your brain expects to see. And again, we have another kind of example here of the elephant ear plant with the smaller one on the top, and then like a medium-sized one, and then a larger one at the bottom. You can create towers with just the large one, which is what we've got here, or you can do it with just the smaller ones, and again, it depends on the effect you're wanting to go for. Now, the next plant I love to do this with is the lobster claw. Now, I like the lobster claw because it's very, very bright. I wish it was a colourable plant, because oh my gosh, the things I would do with this. And essentially, you can use the smaller one again here to kind of stack, and you can just see the kind of effect it has. It creates this very kind of like whimsical, stereotypical kind of jungle feel, which is kind of what I'm going for with DLC Zoo, which is kind of where a lot of this has come from. And again, just make sure you're padding out this. This is the larger version, and you can just really pad it out and create this kind of like densely vegetated patch. And then again, you can do it with size variation. So I think it's just to show you just the kind of how different they can look. And then obviously, you know, there's lots of plants that this can work with. Have an experiment yourself, see what works. Over here we have the African fern, and again, you can just kind of see like the different sizes you can get. And then again, with the Australian fan plant, you've got to be careful though, because sometimes, like you can see here, we've got a bit of a like a trunk like fitting in there. So I would maybe move that one a bit further down, but again, just see what you can get away with essentially. Like if there's lots of leaves here that you're not going to be able to see that trunk, then it doesn't really matter too much, does it? And again, this one is actually with one of the air plants. Now, it looks interesting. It looks kind of very alien, but personally, I would perhaps turn on align to surface and maybe like sink some of these in here just to kind of break up that kind of root effect. Just to make it look like, you know, it's a lot of small leaves. And this is the thing as well, like the more leaves there are, the more realistic it's going to be. So you can see that that does have like quite a stark difference on that now. And again, yeah, we have this aloe vera kind of plant here that came with the Australia update. And as you can see, you can just sort of stack this plant and create that kind of effect again. And remember as well, like whenever you do this, make sure you always have a smaller plant on the top to try and like sell that story, because plants tend to grow with like newer, smaller like leaves at the top compared to the bigger, chunkier plants at the bottom. Like the plant, like again, the leaves at the bottom are often a lot older, and you see this with the plants they create anyway. But it's just something to consider. And again, you can do it with ferns, which is what I've had a go at doing with here. Different layers of ferns, trying to create this big kind of bush. And again, even with palm trees, if you want to just have like lots of leaves to kind of pad like lots of vegetation out. And again, you can have a go. I tend to do it with tropical plants, but I have been having a go with some of the temperate plants. So we have, what's this? The alpine sea holly, which is like from the tundra taiga habitats. And then we have like, I think, what's this? This is an alpine currant. So that, again, that's a cold plant. And you can, they are tend to be smaller because they come from a colder climate, but you can essentially like create bigger bushes, because there's not many kind of bushy plants in the game. A lot of the time you have to sink trees and things, which I don't really like doing because it can add a lot of like trees and plants to your animals' habitats, particularly if you're playing in franchise. So this is just a way around that, I guess. And again, you can do it with some different flowers. This is the papyrus sedge, which I think it creates this very kind of densely vegetated like water plants. And essentially, another one I like to do it with, which I'll just show you, is the lipstick tree, which that's the bigger one. So again, you can just sort of stack this, and you can stack these really, really high and create these kind of like just almost like whimsical kind of plants and stuff, and just build it up like that. And so once you've kind of got like, you know, your base plants, I guess, you can then start stacking them together. So if I move this to over here and then move this, just select these, group them up, move them, start stacking it here. Any of these in a group? Nope, I haven't grouped them yet. But just these and these over here, and you just start like putting them together. And the smaller plants add a lot more detail as well. Like it's all about the finer details, and you can copy and paste them to kind of just create that kind of dense vegetation effect. And again, if we have some of these from over here, I'll just group them together quickly. I have to move them across. Doesn't matter if, again, it doesn't matter how big or small they are. You can stack them as high as you like, depending on what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to create a sense of scale, you want to maybe stack them a bit bigger. If you're trying to keep it like and make it feel like the animals are larger in their habitat, maybe you want to have like a lot of kind of smaller plants. But often I feel like with jungles, you're trying to create like the story of this massive like jungle anyway. So often, you kind of want plants to be very like stacked together and very like vegetative. So as you can see, as soon as it starts going together, it really creates this kind of nicely densely vegetated effect. And then if we just copy and paste this one, and which is one I kind of made earlier, which has got some plants and stuff in it, it's also got the rhubarb plant, and just sort of put that behind it, you can already see like the effect you're getting. So again, if we have a quick look at and disassemble this one, we have a giant rhubarb plant, which is 3 together. So it's the big one, like the medium one and the little one. And then a lot of just the odd random tree just thrown in. So I'm going to copy and paste this and throw this in here just to help add to that effect. And then perhaps maybe we want some smaller plants. So let's put these smaller plants in together. And again, maybe these are just smaller ones that are just growing through. Now, again, this is not necessarily what you would see in real life as well. Like in real life, a lot of the smaller plants would die off because the bigger plants are killing them off. But if you want to create like that kind of feel that it is like a very densely vegetated forest, then this is one way of doing it. And it also creates some really nice like view blocks for the guests and like just barriers as well, because a lot of the times the animals actually can't walk through a lot of these, so that works really nicely there. Anyway, so let's see how we would look at putting plants and rocks together. So here's a little one I did earlier, which I'm just going to move over to here. So this is essentially just something I wanted to show you as well. So a lot of the time when you have rocks, plants grow in the cracks and things like that. So we've got some temperate rocks here, so we'll do this with sort of temperate plants, just to kind of show you, because I think that the temperate plants can be quite good as well, and you get some mosses and things as well. So if I wanted to have a tree, for example, now to start off with, trees grow straight up. Like the plants will grow to the side of the hillside, but trees do tend to grow straight up. So I've got this tree. Now, where do I want to put it? I'm thinking I want to put it here, kind of on this bit of crack here. So it looks like this is kind of going down the side of this rock, and the roots are growing into the rocks, kind of a thing. Now, obviously, we have got a bit of overhanging here, but I mean, we're going to get a bit of rocks like that anyway. So essentially, you want to fill the cracks with plants to kind of create that realistic impact that you're going for here. Again, vary the sizes. You know, they don't have to be touching the rock. They can be raised up a little bit from the rock in the cracks because you won't notice it. And we essentially just want to kind of like hide some of these cracks with the plants, because that's how the plants would grow. Like again, as I said, nature's chaotic. Nature also takes the easiest route. Like plants and water always kind of grow through the easiest route. If there's cracks there, the plants are going to grow through the cracks rather than try and penetrate through the rocks themselves. So it makes sense for plants to kind of be around the rocks per se. And even things like mosses, you want to take like consideration that they're going to be around the cracks, because that's where the cracks are going to hold moisture, you know. So they're going to be like here. That's where it's going to be. They're not going to be on the end here unless this bit is like particularly wet. They're going to be, the mosses are going to be hanging around like here, close to the rock where the water runs down and maybe gets stuck in some of these cracks. Which again, if we get a small piece of moss like so, see these cracks kind of here, if we can kind of make it look like they're sort of going into those cracks, and if we rotate this, and again this kind of crack there, just have a little bit sticking through. So because what eventually happens over time is obviously as the plants grow through the rocks get broken down into soil, and then soil is formed. And then lots of other plants grow. Now, a couple of things as well. As I said, if you are placing trees grow directly upright. They tend to grow straight up towards the light, even if they're on a hill. Trees will correct themselves as well on a hill. It's only in sort of like very like specific circumstances, like for example the wind direction or something like that, the trees would actually kind of grow sort of like this. Most trees grow straight up, and so whenever you're placing trees on a hillside, make sure you are placing them so that they are pointing straight up. And this is not entirely the case for plants. Plants, small flowers and things and grasses do grow on a hillside, but I mean, even if you look at like this, these grasses are only slightly on an angle on the hill. They're not growing like out like that. They're growing kind of more upright. So even the game's mechanics are showing you that kind of is the way you want your trees to be facing. But again, like the kind of plants and vegetation, you can get away with more being on like a line to surface, just because plants don't necessarily correct themselves the same way as a fully grown tree does. So that's kind of like, you know, just a bit of a tutorial on kind of like, you know, putting plants in, trying to make that a bit realistic, and also about hill plants as well. And the final thing I wanted to talk to you about was like aquatic plants, because you can pull all this together to kind of create some really nice looking like aquatic plants and waterfalls and things. So here we have the aquatic waterfalls that I have just kind of thrown together. Now this area that I've coloured in sand, I have decided that this is my wet zone. So this basically means that this area around here is going to be affected by splashes from the waterfalls. So if I'm thinking of putting rocks in, and I want to have some mossy rocks, I would go for the dynamic mossy rocks, but I would only sort of have them in this kind of zone. And I would maybe have, you know, just to try and, again, sell that story that this is a waterfall. It's raging, there's a lot of kind of, like, you know, water splashing off, so the rocks are wet, so that's why the plants are growing there. So, you know, with aquatic plants, you're also going to be getting, like, a fair bit of like mossy rocks and things around here. Now you can either use the dynamic mossy rocks, or you can use the fully mossy rocks and then like embed it in with the tropical rocks. I mean, again, not all of these are going to be completely covered. If you then wanted to add your own moss, again, do what I said before. Make sure that, you know, the big chunky moss is really growing thick in these kind of cracks, because that's going to be where the water will be accumulating for a long time. And so again, when you're doing rocks and things, and if we go for aquatic plants, let's have a look at what we got. So again, things like reeds, again, they're big enough that your brain will notice it if they're not like vertical. So you want to embed these in the riverbed, because reeds grow huge. They will grow very, very tall, because they will grow very, very straight. They've got a very like stable branch. And then mangrove trees, for example, again, these will probably grow, particularly the smaller ones, like again, kind of from the rocks into the water, in the cracks where the soil accumulates and things like that. So that's where the roots will go. And then if we have a look, perhaps we can have a lipstick palm. We'll pop that there in that kind of crack where maybe some like stuff's accumulating. And then over here, we'll have some giant rhubarb plants at the back here, but we'll have it so that they're stacked high to kind of just give that very densely like vegetated effect. And again, this is wet. This is my wet area, so you would be expecting, you know, maybe some like more aquatic plants. Like for example, in the UK we have alders and willows that like aquatic plants, but we have willows here, for example. So you would expect these to be in like this kind of on the banks of the river, because it's this very wet zone that they really like that kind of wet soil. And then once we've sort of had that bit done, we would probably be having things like maybe the air plants, or maybe just other smaller plants that are kind of growing in these rocks over here. So they are just sort of really like, you know, just in these cracks. These are aquatic rocks are really great for this. Maybe we have some roots. And again, like roots are nearly always going to be growing down into the soil. So if your roots, you want to make sure that they're growing straight down, essentially. So I'm going to have this like here, and then we'll put a strangular fig and just have that growing like there. So that's a bit dramatic, it looks a bit big, but sometimes having just the bigger trees can like give you that impact that you're after, if you want to make it like a feature as well. So, and then again, your brain starts to fill in the gaps that are missing there as well. So yeah, so this is kind of like our wet zone. So I think we would have some papyrus sedge, and again I would be rotating it just to make it feel more densely vegetated. Perhaps I would be sinking some higher bits in, and then once we've sort of got that, pulled all that together, I would come over here and I would take maybe some of this, some of our plants that we've got here, and pop that kind of just like here, away, and this is coming away from kind of like the splash zone now. Often in wet areas you're going to get like trees that have a lot of roots growing into them because they need a lot of water. Like trees need a lot of water, so I mean it depends on the type of tree as well, but generally you would probably get a stranglefic tree on the side of like some rocks where it gets splashed regularly. Other plants you might have would be perhaps the Swiss cheese plant, because they like it very wet and damp. And again, you don't necessarily have to know a lot about the plant itself, but just, you know, making it up in your head as well can also help, and just like helps you sell that. And again, I'm putting the plants in these cracks here. And heck, I could again probably stack this again, because Swiss cheese plants can grow absolutely massive, and that is something that I think is really quite disappointing with this game, is that, you know, the plants are really quite small. When you look at like Prehistoric Kingdom, and how you can kind of create these like massive plants, you can really sell that story as well. And that's all you're trying to do. You're just trying to sell a story to the people who are looking at your habitat, to your guests, that this is just, you know, this plant's grown here for ages. It's the roots are coming out now. And again, they're growing in the side of things, they're growing in the side of the rocks and things. And so that's how I would kind of, you know, maybe decorate the rocks. I'd be focusing on all these little cracks that you can see, and then that way you can create some kind of realistic vegetation. So I hope this has been useful. As you can see here, we have our very densely vegetated area here, and then like our splash zone where there's lots of reeds and things, and then that's our main thing, and that's our main kind of feature. I will actually upload all this and pop this on the workshop, I think, because I actually really like how it's turned out. But yeah, so if you've got any comments or questions, please feel free to drop them below in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer them. And I hope you found this tutorial useful for kind of creating very densely vegetated areas, and just for some general tips and tricks on vegetation. I'll catch you in the next one, and see you later, guys.